And we're going to move on to a live speaker again now, so please send in your questions on the questions and answer pane. So now we'll move to Dr. Sibylle Thies, who will be telling us about her work with walking aids.
Yes, hello, good morning. Thank you so much for letting me talk to you today about our research that is concerned with biomechanical analyses of assisted ambulation, or in simple terms, you can just say walking with walking aids, and that is what we are interested in. Our journey today starts in the Staffordshire Moorlands. That's where I'm based at the moment, in this beautiful old church house. So hopefully my internet won't let me down, but I just had a sign come up saying bad quality. Fingers crossed it will last till the end. From here, I'm going to give you some background about our research and hopefully get you excited about walking aids. And I will tell you about our approach that we have taken, what we have learned so far. We have had this research ongoing for about 7 years now. And I will finish off with giving you a bit of a glimpse of the efforts we are currently doing to create impact. So you've probably wondered why we bother with walking aids. Walking aids seem to be such a simple and straightforward intervention. They haven't really changed in decades in terms of what they look like and how they are designed. And why do we actually need to look at them and investigate them in a biomechanical manner? Well, there's quite a challenge associated with the use of walking aids. And as you can see on this picture, there are a number of walking aids available, different types. So there are walking frames and walking sticks. And between these two types of walking aids, again, you have subcategories, walking aids with wheels or no wheels, wheels at the front. And with regard to the walking sticks, you have them with 1 foot or multiple feet and different types of handles. So there are a lot of types of walking aids available. At the same time, the population to which they're handed out to is a very diverse population. So the users also differ from each other. You can have a user that is in rehabilitation because they had a hip transplant or a hip injury, or you could have the general older person that is in a care home and just needs a walking aid to help them with their balance. And then again, you could have someone who had perhaps a stroke and is just getting back on their feet, has perhaps a condition called drop foot, and does need a walking aid to maintain stable when they walk out and about. So the population is very diverse of the users, and the number of types of walking aids is immense, and getting the match right, prescribing the right walking aid to the right person is quite a challenge. And at the same time, the guidance that is available in terms of leaflets that are either coming from the manufacturer or from a clinical trust is very, very basic. For example, the one sentence that they tend to have is glide the frame forward, then step into the frame. Some go a little bit further, that they talk about not stepping too far forward or not being too far behind the frame, but that's pretty much where it ends when it comes to these guidance leaflets. Let's have a look at how that actually works in the real world. I hope the video plays for you. Maybe Mick can give me a thumbs up if it plays. Yep, good, great. So you can see it looks all right when they walk forward, but now they've reached the end of the room. They were only told to walk and then come back again. And you can see what they do when they want to come back now to the researcher that's waiting on the other side. So they pivot their walking frame on 1 foot, turning it. So at this point, the person is stabilizing the walking aid. Then they have to move behind it again and very nearly collide with their foot and the foot of the walking frame. So you can see that the simple instruction of glide the frame forward and then step into it is not really enough. There is a paradox associated with walking aids. They're being handed out to help people maintain balance and reduce their falls, but at the same time, studies have shown that people who report to generally be using a walking aid, they still remain at an increased falls risk. In fact, they are at a 2 to 3-fold risk of falling compared to a similar age-matched control that doesn't have a walking aid. And there are also studies who have looked at use of a walking aid in relation to sustaining fall-related injuries and have established links there. But why is it that older people that use walking aids still experience falls, and not just a few falls more, but actually 2 to 3-fold risk of falling? And that's why we became curious and we began to ask ourselves, what actually is safe and stable walking aid use? So when we began our research back in the days, our first aim was to develop a method and instrumentation that we nicknamed smart walkers that would allow us to characterize walking aid use and also to quantify stability of walking aid users. And once we would have such a method in place, we could then go out and explore how people were actually using their walking aids and identify how stable they are when using their walking aids. And it was our long-term aim to actually use our findings to inform prescription, user guidance and training, and also design of walking aids. So how did we go about this? There was no method available, so we had to come up with an approach to characterize walking aid use and stability in users. And when we looked at our walking aid problem, we actually saw quite some similarity as compared to multi-legged robots. So we looked at the robotics literature, and you can see on the right-hand side, Rex. I think he's from the United States. Multiple universities have worked on him. And you can see that Rex has 6 legs, and it's very similar and comparable to our problem where the user, together with their walking aid, actually have 6 feet. And at any moment in time, the user may have as little as 1 foot on the ground and as many as 6, or something in between. Now, with regard to the robotics literature, there is one measure that came up, and that is the stability margin. The stability margin is a measure that is the distance from the center of pressure of the walking robot to the edge of the base of support. Now, these are the technical terms. In very simple terms, it basically tells you how close the walking robot is from tipping over. And we thought that this stability margin would be quite a useful method for our problem of walking aid use, to get an idea on how stable the person is and how close they are from the point of tipping over. And when I say the person, I actually mean the system. We look at the person and their walking aid as a single system. But to actually cook up our stability measure, we actually needed some ingredients. And we have 3 different types of instrumentation that are required to compute our stability margin. First of all, we need to know the forces in the legs of the walking aid. And therefore, we placed load cells into the feet of the walking frame. And also, we needed the forces from the user's feet. And therefore, we had pressure sensing insoles in the user's shoes. Now, these would allow us to compute the center of pressure, together also then with the optoelectronic cameras that inform on the relative position of the user feet in relation to the feet of the walking frame. We can compute the base of support, and having both outcomes in place, we then compute our stability margin as the distance from the center of pressure to the nearest edge of the base of support. Now we show here a front-wheeled walker, but we actually have instrumented 3 types of walking frames to date. We also have a pickup walker and a 4-wheeled rollator that are instrumented in the same way. And we have used all 3 frames in a number of studies. And we are going through some of the core findings, not all of them, but just a few highlights of our research over the years. So our very first study took us actually to Germany, because there was a German geriatrics ward that was interested in rollator users and stability. They had already done some work, some qualitative work about tasks that users reported to be challenging, and asked us to come over and look at whether these tasks actually have an effect on stability as compared to straight line walking. And as you can see on the y-axis, I'm showing you the stability margin, and on the x-axis, straight line walking up front, and then followed by other more complex tasks of everyday living, doing a 90-degree turn, doing a 180-degree turn, walking backwards as if to open a door, crossing an obstacle, or taking a step up. And what we found is that for these complex tasks, stability was reduced. And yet, when you look back at the guidance that I cited at the very beginning, it talks pretty much just about straight line walking, push the frame forward and then step into it. So it is not considering in any form more complex activities of daily living. Second, we looked at incorrect use, and incorrect use is in accordance with guidance documents. So for example, for pickup walker users, the guidance does indicate that you should not be stepping while you lift the pickup walker. Only once the walker is back on the ground should you be following with your feet. With a front-wheeled walker that has 2 wheels at the front, really you shouldn't be lifting it at all. So based on that, we defined incorrect use to be lifting at certain moments in time for these two walking aids. So for the front wheel walker at any moment in time, and for the pickup walker, lifting of the walker while the person is stepping. And I'm not showing it here on this slide, but what we found in a group of, I believe it was 18 older adults in their own home, we assessed them in their own home, everybody had some degree of incorrect use, and it ranged from roughly 10% to as much as 80% of the time. So we actually had people in that study that more or less were carrying their walking aid around most of the time. We took that finding and wanted to now look at stability in relation to incorrect use. And what we found is that these moments of lifting, which are incorrect use according to guidance documents, actually are associated with much reduced stability. And you can see that in these two graphs. These are two different studies that we've done. One study assessed pickup walkers and front wheel walkers, both in our activities of daily living flat and the laboratory. And you can see that regardless of where we tested them, whether it was in the lab or in the ADL flat, whether it was the pickup walker or the front wheel walker, for incorrect use, the stability values were always reduced as compared to correct use. The second study we did, we actually wanted to look at dimensions of the walking aid. We played with the width of the walking aid and the height. That's a different topic. But again, it didn't really matter what the width was, what the height was, or if it was a normal stand-up walker with standard width and standard height. What showed throughout the study again was that incorrect use led to reduced stability. So we're quite confident in that outcome, that these lifting behaviors that we observe are not beneficial to stability. We also found that increased body weight transfer increases stability. That was a very interesting insight. So those people that actually place more body weight onto their walking frame have better stability. And that's quite an interesting finding and of clinical relevance, especially to those that still have falls when they're using their walking aid. Perhaps encouragement to put a bit more weight onto the frame and use it more for structural support, at least during times when they do challenging tasks, such as walking backwards to open a door. That could be quite useful for them to be more stable. So my takeaway message really is for today that what we need to do is to challenge and revolutionize both current clinical practice and also design of walking aids. Training and guidance should not be limited to straight line walking. And what we really need is to develop and provide feasible guidance for a range of tasks in the home. And that must be developed in relation to stability. I note that at the moment, while we know that these lifting behaviors reduce stability, we have not yet identified optimal strategies for different tasks that maximize stability. So that is a next step. Also, we know that design must be improved to facilitate safer and more stable use of walking aids. If we think back about the video that I showed at the very beginning, the front wheel walker has wheels that are fixed in line, they can swivel, and it's just like if I was going to sell you a BMW that cannot turn, you probably wouldn't buy it. So we believe that there is quite some room for design improvements that need to be done to actually enable everyday performance of tasks without the need to lift the device. So I promised to give you a little bit of a glimpse towards changes we're taking for impact generation. And the very first thing we did is we actually put our research findings to date into some documentation and videos that are openly accessible on this webpage. We have created new leaflets for both walking frame users and also healthcare professionals. And we have associated training videos, which has never been done before, that actually have put our research findings into something clinically useful. And we have already had some feedback from clinicians that, especially now at COVID, where face-to-face consultations have become quite difficult, these resources are quite useful. At the same time, just last week, we started a new project, a knowledge transfer partnership with a manufacturer. And with them together, we are hoping to develop the very first biomechanics informed walking frame. So that is quite exciting as well. And in particular, we'll be focusing on enabling complex tasks of everyday living. And then last but not least, I probably am a little stressed this week because we're working on an Invention for Innovation grant that's going in about a week's time. And what we really want to do is take the technology that we have created, repackage it, and turn it into a clinically useful assessment tool, and also into a reduced system that can be used for real-world monitoring and thereby help patients to self-manage their use of the walking aid so that they are stable and safe. I'd like to thank everybody who has been supporting this work over the years. As I said, it has been quite a few years that we have been doing this. And thank you very much for your attention. And if there are any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Sibylle. That was a great presentation. I have, first of all, maybe because I'm a designer, a question about design, and you did the great analogy of you wouldn't buy a car which only goes in a straight line. And also you mentioned that you're now working on a partnership with a manufacturer to improve design, which just sounds great. Are there any other general points about design which you could make?
Other points about design, it's difficult to say at the moment. There's one design that I almost think, I don't know if this is a good device to begin with, and that's perhaps something we need to explore now in our new KTP, and that's the pickup walker. My opinion is that we hand out walking aids to support the person. How can we have a walking aid that the person needs to support on every single movement cycle? So I think that is perhaps something that needs revisiting as well, to see, is this frame actually fit for purpose? It is not the focus of the KTP though, but it's certainly worth some conversations whether this device is actually a good idea.
And then we've got a question from Malcolm. Good evidence-based guidance is important, and I am sure welcome. Do you think there are any barriers to how the guidance might be used by the users, by the therapists and walking aid users?
Yes, I mean, first of all, I think especially at the moment, it is going to be very limited to people being cognitively able. And we are well aware that that is not the case for some larger proportion of walking aid users. So if you think about the care home environment and people with dementia, they will struggle following new instructions. My thinking is, though, if we do a culture change, we can create a culture change, and perhaps at a point where dementia has not begun or is at the early stage, and you train them up so they have already a usage pattern basically built in, perhaps then it can be retained. So maybe it is catching them early and educating them early could be key in that regard. In terms of barriers, we also, I don't want to lie, so we have quite a few physios that are excited about this work, but we also have other physios that say, you know, I've been doing this for 30 years. I don't really see why I should be changing what I'm doing. I think we can only do that, like break that barrier by involving more physios, which we intend to do, especially in the KTP as well. We will have an advisory group of physios. I'm working with some organizations such as Agile, chartered physiotherapists working with older people, and hopefully over time we'll be able to reduce that barrier to some extent. But it will be difficult because it will be a culture change to have a tool like this support them in their assessments and training.
Great, thank you very much. I think there was a question from Ben, but I think you've covered that. So if we move on now to our next speaker,